Hello, my name's Miss Rogers and I'm here today to talk to you about monologues and how to prepare for a monologue so that you can get it to a place where you can perform it to your peers and your teacher for further feedback. I've got 7 ideas to suggest to you today that you can go away and try, and these ideas will really help you, especially if you're taking the Edexcel drama exam section 2A, because you have to write a 500-word statement about how you prepared for that monologue. Or it could also help you for the Level 3 Performing Arts BTEC Unit 18 auditions for actors and singers, and that will help you in terms of writing your logbook as to how you prepared for the monologue. So, the first activity I would suggest that you do when preparing for a monologue is to read the play in which the monologue comes from, or at least very thoroughly research it. It's really important that you're able to put that character in context, and it's really important that you know the impetus for that character to speak, so why they are saying this monologue at that point in time in the play. Number 2 is a Stanislavski technique called given circumstances, and I'd really strongly suggest that you have a research of that if you haven't heard of it before. But essentially what it's asking you to do is write down a list of everything that the character says about themselves, or the stage directions say about them, or indeed other characters say about them, up until and including the monologue itself throughout the play. And this list can kind of act as a character profile for you to build up a picture of who that person is. Number 3 is another Stanislavski technique, and again I'd strongly recommend that you research this if you haven't heard it before, and it's units and objectives. And that loosely translates to finding out what the objective for your character is throughout that monologue. So what is your character trying to achieve by saying this monologue? And then you need to think about what actions, either thoughts or physical movement, that they're going to do in order to achieve that objective. This is a really useful one actually for annotating your monologue and looking at subtext in particular. Number 4 is an exercise that I really like to do with my students, and it's very loosely based on Brooks Essentials exercise. Again, that's a really good one to research, and I call it the character arc. So what I ask you to do is look at 4 stages of this activity. A is to consider 3 emotions that you feel your character goes through throughout the monologue and pinpoint when those emotions are felt the strongest. And you should kind of have a sort of rough beginning, middle and end emotion. Then I'd suggest as B that you freeze frame those emotions considering body language, facial expressions and levels, and really try and represent what that emotion is to the audience through just the visual. Then C, I suggest that you try and move between each of those freeze frames. And I'd like you to consider very carefully rhythm, pace and tempo. So for example, if you feel that the first emotion your character goes through is anger, perhaps they're moving very quickly into the second freeze frame, which might be sadness, in which case they're moving very slowly into the next emotion that might be regret. And that will tell you something about the pace at which you might want to set your monologue. And finally, D is to add a caption to each of the freeze frames. So choose the line that you feel best represents that emotion and what your character's going through, and you'll have the essentials of the monologue then. And what I'd suggest after that is to then record yourself doing all of those sections together, and also take photographs of the freeze frames that you've created. And then you can have a consider as to whether actually what you're showing your audience is what you intended. Number 5 is what I like to call the other person conundrum. And I feel very strongly about this actually, that you should only speak directly to the audience if the monologue itself is direct address. If the monologue has another character in it, because within the play text itself there is another character on stage and they've been engaging in a dialogue, it's really important to put that other character on stage with you. And a way that you can do this and really develop your monologue style is by having a monologue buddy. So that could be one of your friends, it could be a parent, or it could be somebody in your drama class. Give them a little bit of background about the character that they're going to be playing, and then sit them on stage somewhere and ask them to react as you go through the monologue to what you're saying. And what's really interesting is that you'll find that your interpretation will change as you are reacting to what the other person on stage is doing. Number 6 is a really good one to kind of play around with as you're getting to know your monologue, and it's Max Stafford Clark's status game with a pack of cards. You can shuffle the pack of cards, and whatever card you pull out of the deck, you then play the entire monologue in that status. So if it's a 2, you play very vulnerable, very low status, and actually see whether the contrasting statuses throw up something really interesting that you haven't thought of before within the monologue that you might want to keep, that just adds depth to the way that you're performing your monologue. And finally, number 7, this is something that I've always done when accessing monologues with my students, and it's about visualization, and it's about really embodying and building the space in which your monologue is taking place, so that the audience believe that you're not just standing on a stage, that you're actually somewhere specific to that character. So the way that you can do this is by sitting or standing in your space and asking yourself a few questions of the environment in which you are trying to show your audience. And all of these things will let you react using body language and facial expressions, and indeed your blocking around the space. So things like, where are you? What is the temperature like? What objects are around you? Can you use them? Can you touch them? How heavy are they? What's beneath your feet? Can you see the sky? An interesting one to think about for claustrophobia. What's the weather like? How large is the space? How important or safe do you feel within that space? I really strongly believe that if you believe the world that you create, then your audience will understand it. So I hope you found those 7 ideas really helpful to help you access your monologues at this time. Good luck with your exam or the auditions that you are doing. And remember that these are just the first steps to get you to a place where you can perform confidently with an informed character, and you should then be able to get really good feedback from your teachers to help you improve that further.